Some people are waiting on money, waiting on opportunities, waiting on doors to open. But heaven is waiting on their words. Your financial future is not first decided in your bank account. It is decided in your mouth. God never designed your words to describe your lack. He designed your words to create your breakthrough. You don't move into increase by talking about bills, pressure, and what you don't have. You move into increase when your mouth lines up with God's provision. The same voice that complains can create. The same mouth that talks fear can speak faith. Financial breakthrough doesn't begin when something shows up in your hand. It begins when something changes in your confession. Your words are spiritual containers. When you speak doubt, you carry defeat. When you speak faith, you carry supply. Poverty talks problems. Faith talks provision. The miracle is voice activated. Before the harvest appears in your life, the seed must come out of your mouth. Some people are praying for prosperity while speaking lack every day. That is a divided flow. Faith works when your heart believes and your mouth agrees. When you start saying what God says about your provision, you step into the system of the kingdom. Your breakthrough has been waiting on a sound, the sound of faith coming out of you. Today is the day you stop financing your lack with your words and start financing your future with your confession. Your mouth is not just for conversation, it is a steering wheel. Just like a small rudder turns a large ship, your words are turning your financial life every single day, whether you realize it or not. Many people think money is controlled only by education, economy, or opportunity, but long before it shows up in your hands, it has already been shaped by what has been coming out of your mouth. Direction always comes before destination, and your mouth is setting that direction daily. When you constantly say, I can't afford it, money is hard to get, I'm always behind, you are not just describing your situation, you are establishing a path. Words are never empty in the realm of the Spirit. They carry belief, expectation, and authority. Your life moves in the direction of your dominant confession. If your mouth keeps pointing toward lack, struggle becomes the road you travel. If your mouth begins to point toward supply, wisdom, and provision, you start turning toward increase. God designed faith to be voice activated. Believing in your heart is vital, but belief is given direction when your mouth releases it. Just like a GPS gives guidance to a vehicle, your words give guidance to your life. You may love God, pray, and work hard, but if your mouth keeps setting coordinates toward shortage, you will keep circling the same financial wilderness. The system of the kingdom responds to faith-filled words, not fear-filled reports. Many people have unknowingly trained their mouths to agree with their problems more than with God's promises. They rehearse bills, debt, and pressure until those things feel permanent. But every time you repeat the problem, you strengthen its direction in your life. Words are like rails on a track. Once the track is laid, the train follows it. If the track of your speech is laid in doubt and lack, your financial life keeps rolling the same way. Change the rails and you change where the train goes. This is why confession is not a religious ritual, it is spiritual alignment. When you say, God supplies all my needs, I am blessed, I have wisdom for increase, agreement with what God has already declared about your provision, your ability to prosper, and your covenant right to live in supply instead of constant lack. Because the moment your mouth changes direction, your life begins to follow that new course even before the evidence appears, and while circumstances are still catching up to the words you have chosen to speak in faith rather than fear, in expectation rather than doubt, and in alignment with heaven's economy rather than the limitations of what you currently see. You cannot talk lack and expect increase because words are not neutral, they are agreements. Every time you speak, you are coming into agreement with something. When your mouth constantly rehearses shortage, struggle, and insufficiency, you are aligning yourself with limitation instead of provision. Increase flows in the direction of faith, but lack is sustained by the language of doubt. Many people desire financial breakthrough, yet their daily speech is voting against the very thing they are praying for. Saying, I never have enough, money slips through my hands, or things are just getting worse, may feel honest, but those words are not harmless observations. They are confessions that empower the problem. Your mouth reinforces what you repeatedly declare. Faith speaks what God has promised. not just what circumstances report. If all you do is echo what you see in the natural, you stay locked into the natural. Increase begins when your words rise above your present condition. The system of the world says seeing is believing, but the system of faith says believing is speaking. You speak first, then you see. That is why talking lack is so dangerous. It keeps your expectation anchored to what is missing. Expectation is the breeding ground of manifestation. If your expectation is shaped by negative confession, you subconsciously prepare for shortage. Your decisions, your confidence, and your outlook begin to match what your mouth has been declaring. You cannot plant seeds of corn and expect a harvest of wheat, and you cannot plant words of poverty and expect a harvest of prosperity. Words are seeds. Every statement about your finances goes into the soil of your future. Some people are watering weeds with their mouths while praying for fruit. Complaining, worrying out loud, and constantly magnifying bills is like fertilizing the very thing you want removed. Faith does not deny facts, but it refuses to let facts have the final word. When you talk lack, you also train your mind to look for evidence of failure. Your focus narrows to what is wrong. You become more aware of expenses than opportunities, more conscious of obstacles than ideas. Your mouth influences your mindset, and your mindset influences your actions. Increase often requires bold steps, creative thinking, and confidence, but negative confession drains that confidence before you even try. You talk yourself out of possibilities before they have a chance to appear. God's provision flows where there is agreement with His Word. Scripture reveals supply, abundance, and blessing as part of covenant life. When your mouth contradicts that, you create inner conflict. Your heart may believe in God's goodness, but your words cancel your faith. Faith works when the heart and mouth are in unity. Divided speech produces divided results. Saying one thing in prayer and another or thing all day long weakens your spiritual authority. It is also important to understand that talking increase is not pretending everything is perfect. It is choosing to speak from promise instead of pressure. Pressure screams what is missing. Promise declares what is provided. Faith-filled words do not ignore reality. They challenge it. They introduce a higher truth into a lower situation. When you say, God is my source, you are shifting your dependence from circumstances to covenant. That shift opens the door for wisdom, favor, and unexpected channels. Your environment often talks lack. News, conversations, and even well-meaning people may speak fear about the economy and the future. If you repeat those voices, you reinforce a culture of limitation in your own life. Faith requires guarding your mouth. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every report deserves agreement. Sometimes increase begins with silence toward doubt and boldness toward promise. The tongue has creative power. It frames how you experience life. If your words constantly frame your financial life as a struggle, that frame shapes what you notice, what you expect, and how you respond. Changing your language is not about hype. It is about spiritual law. Agreement with lack sustains lack, but agreement with provision makes room for increase to operate in ways you could not produce by effort alone. And when your mouth consistently declares supply, wisdom, favor, and opportunity, you break the cycle of reinforcing limitation and step into a flow where your words no longer hold you in shortage, but begin aligning you with the reality of God's ongoing provision, causing your thinking, expecting acting to gradually match the abundance you have been boldly confessing rather than the fear you once repeated, without realizing you were empowering the very condition you wanted to escape. Faith-filled words are not empty religious phrases, they are spiritual triggers. God designed faith to be released through speech. All through Scripture, we see that believing and speaking are connected. The heart believes, but the mouth activates. Provision has already been made in the realm of the Spirit, but faith-filled words are what give that provision access into your everyday life. You don't beg God into supplying your needs. You believe and speak in agreement with what He has already promised. When your words are filled with faith, they carry expectation. Expectation is what positions you to receive. Many people speak from memory instead of promise. They talk based on what happened before, what failed, what didn't work. Faith speaks from covenant, not history. Your past may say struggle, but God's word says supply. When your mouth sides with the word instead of your past, you step into a different system. Faith-filled words lift you out of a cycle of limitation and into a flow of provision that does not depend solely on natural circumstances. Faith is not a feeling, it is a decision to agree with God. That agreement becomes powerful when it is voiced. Words give faith direction and authority. Silence may keep belief hidden, but speaking releases it. Just like a key activates an engine, your confession activates what you believe. You can have faith in your heart about provision, but if your mouth constantly contradicts it, you shut the door you are asking God to open. Faith. H-filled words keep that door open. These words also shape your inner world. When you say, God is my source, I am provided for, I have wisdom for increase, your spirit is strengthened. Fear weakens, doubt loses volume, and confidence grows. Your mouth ministers to your own heart. Before faith moves anything around you, it stabilizes something within you. Peace replaces panic. Confidence replaces hesitation. That inner strength is part of provision because it positions you to recognize and step into opportunities God brings your way. Faith-filled words also resist the pressure of circumstances. Bills, needs, and unexpected expenses try to create emotional reactions. Pressure wants you to speak in fear. The moment you say, I don't know what I'm going to do, you start aligning with uncertainty instead of trust. But when you say, God is faithful and supply is working for me, you push back against that pressure. Your words become a shield. They guard your heart from sinking into worry, and they keep your focus on promise instead of problems. The kingdom of God operates on spiritual laws, and confession is one of them. Just as natural laws work, whether you understand them or not, spiritual laws respond when they are put into motion. Faith-filled words are not about trying to convince God. They are about cooperating with how His system functions. He responds to faith, and faith speaks. When your words line up with His promises of provision, you are operating within that system. It is alignment, not effort alone, that produces results. Your words can also change the atmosphere around you. Negative speech fills an environment with heaviness, discouragement, and limitation. Faith-filled speech releases hope, expectation, and confidence. People around you are affected by the tone of your confession. Doors often open through relationships, ideas, and favor, and faith-filled words help cultivate an atmosphere where those things can grow. You become someone who expects good, looks for opportunity, and speaks possibility instead of defeat. There may be times when you don't feel full of faith. Circumstances can look convincing. But faith is not measured by emotion. It is expressed through choice. Choosing to speak God's provision when you feel pressure is an act of spiritual authority. It declares that His word has more weight than your feelings. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Your mouth develops a habit of faith, and that habit keeps provision active in your awareness and expectation, causing you to live with a steady confidence that supply is present and working even when you cannot yet see the evidence in your bank account or surroundings, because faith-filled words continue to release agreement with heaven's provision, strengthening your heart, guiding your thinking, and keeping you positioned to receive through channels God arranges beyond what your natural understanding could have predicted or controlled by effort alone. Complaining may feel natural, but it is spiritually costly. Every complaint is a confession of frustration, and frustration is rooted in focusing on what is missing rather than on who God is as your source. When you complain about money, bills, or pressure, you are not just releasing emotion, you are releasing agreement with lack. Complaining keeps your attention locked onto the problem, and whatever holds your focus begins to grow in influence over your thinking, your emotions, and your expectations. Confession, on the other hand, releases faith. Where complaining magnifies the obstacle, Confession magnifies the promise. Your mouth will always magnify something. If you constantly talk about how hard things are, how expensive everything is, and how you never get ahead, you are enlarging the problem in your own mind. The problem starts to look bigger than God's provision. But when you confess, God is my provider, I am blessed, and supply is working for me, you are enlarging your awareness of His faithfulness. What becomes bigger in your sight influences how you respond. Complaining also drains your confidence. It reinforces a sense of helplessness. Each negative statement subtly says, I am stuck. Nothing is changing, or there is no way out. That mindset weakens faith because faith expects movement. Confession, however, builds expectation. It reminds you that God is at work even when you cannot see immediate evidence. It keeps hope alive. Hope is essential because faith flows where there is confident expectation of good. There is also a spiritual principle of authority involved. Your words carry authority in your life. When you complain, you hand authority to the problem. You give it permission to dominate your conversation and shape your outlook. But when you confess God's promises, you exercise authority over your thoughts and emotions. You refuse to let circumstances dictate your speech. That act of choosing faith-filled words is an act of spiritual resistance against fear and limitation. Complaining spreads quickly. It influences the atmosphere around you. When you talk negatively about finances, others often join in. Conversations become filled with fear, worry, and discouragement. That environment makes it harder for anyone involved to think creatively or expectantly. Confession does the opposite. It releases faith into the atmosphere. It shifts conversations from panic to possibility. It opens space for ideas, encouragement, and perspective that align with increase rather than survival. It is important to understand that confession is not denial. You may have real bills and real needs. Faith does not ignore those realities, but it refuses to let them control your mouth. Complaining says this is all there is. Confession says this is the situation, but God is greater. That difference changes how you carry pressure. Instead of being weighed down, you stand steady, believing that provision is already arranged in ways you may not yet see. Complaining also forms habits of thought. The more you verbalize what is wrong, the more your mind searches for additional evidence to support that view. You begin to notice every expense, every delay, every inconvenience. Your perspective narrows. Confession retrains your mind. When you consistently speak provision and favor, you begin noticing opportunities, small blessings, and unexpected help. Your awareness shifts, and that shift affects the choices you make. The Israelites in the wilderness are a clear picture of this principle. They had provision, guidance, and promise, yet their constant complaining kept them focused on what they thought they lacked. Their words shaped their experience. In contrast, a spirit of faith speaks differently even under pressure. It acknowledges the challenge, but declares God's faithfulness louder than the difficulty. Your mouth is always releasing something, either fear or faith, either complaint or confession. One keeps you circling problems, the other moves you toward promise. You cannot consistently complain about lack and expect to walk in abundance because complaining reinforces the very mindset that limits you. While confession releases alignment with God's provision, strengthens your heart under pressure, shifts the atmosphere around you, and keeps you positioned in expectation rather than frustration as you choose again and again to let your words agree with His faithfulness instead of rehearsing the weight of temporary circumstances. Your words are not just sounds, they are seeds. Every time you speak about your finances, your future, or your provision, you are planting something into the soil of your life. Seeds may look small and insignificant when they are first sown, but they carry life within them. In the same way, your words may seem ordinary, but they carry belief, expectation, and direction. Over time, what you have consistently spoken begins to grow into visible results. A farmer understands that harvest is not accidental. It is the result of what was planted, how often it was planted, and what kind of seed was used. If he wants corn, he plants corn. He does not plant weeds and expect fruit. Yet many people unknowingly plant words of fear, doubt, and lack. then wonder why their financial life reflects struggle. Words of poverty produce a harvest of limitation. Words of faith produce a harvest of provision. The principle works whether you are aware of it or not. Seeds also require time. You do not put a seed into the ground and expect a full harvest the next day. There is a process of growth that happens beneath the surface before anything is visible. The same is true with your words. When you begin to speak provision, wisdom, and increase, you may not see immediate change, but something is happening in the unseen realm. Your confession is taking root. Faith remains steady during this time, knowing that growth is in progress even when the ground looks the same. Consistency is key in planting. A single positive statement mixed with constant negative talk is like planting one good seed in a field full of weeds. The dominant seed determines the harvest. That is why guarding your mouth daily matters. Repeated words shape your expectation and your direction. When your speech becomes consistently aligned with God's promises, you are filling the field of your future with seeds of increase rather than seeds of shortage. Your words also affect the condition of the soil, which is your heart. Negative speech hardens the heart with discouragement and fear. Faith-filled speech keeps the heart soft, hopeful, and receptive. A good heart is fertile ground for God's guidance, ideas, and opportunities. When your heart is filled with expectation instead of frustration, you are more likely to recognize the small steps that lead to bigger provision. Your words help maintain that inner condition. There is also a multiplying aspect to seeds. One seed can produce a plant with many more seeds. In the same way, one faith-filled confession can lead to an idea. That idea can lead to an opportunity, and that opportunity can lead to increase beyond what you first imagined. Words set chains of events into motion. Negative words can start a chain of fear-based decisions, while faith-filled words can start a chain of wise, bold, and confident steps. It is important to speak the harvest you desire, not just the field you see. A farmer does not stand over bare soil saying, "I see nothing." Circumstances often test your confession. Bills may still come, opportunities may seem delayed, and pressure may try to convince you that nothing is working. That is the moment your words matter most. Anyone can speak faith when everything looks good. Faith that produces results speaks when evidence is not yet visible. It declares provision in the middle of need, peace in the middle of pressure, and supply in the face of lack. That steady voice of agreement keeps your heart from being overwhelmed. Speaking until you see is not about repeating words mechanically. It is about maintaining alignment. Every time doubt suggests a different conclusion, you choose to return to what God has said. This keeps your focus fixed. Your mouth becomes a guard for your heart, not allowing fear to settle in. When you repeatedly say, "God is my source, I am provided for, and increase is working in my life," you are strengthening your inner posture of trust. Time can be a challenge to faith. The longer something takes, the louder natural reasoning becomes. Thoughts like, "Maybe this isn't for me," or "It never works out," try to creep in. If those thoughts reach your mouth, they begin to reshape your expectation. That is why holding your confession steady matters. Words help you outlast doubt. They remind you of truth when feelings fluctuate. They keep you connected to promise instead of letting you drift into resignation. Your words also influence your patience. Patience is not passive waiting, it is steady expectation. Confession feeds that expectation. It keeps hope alive. Hope is the anchor that prevents your faith from collapsing under delay. When you keep speaking God's promises, you remind yourself that unseen things are still real and active. Just because you cannot see movement does not mean nothing is happening. Faith understands that spiritual processes can be at work long before natural evidence appears. There is also a strengthening effect that happens through repeated confession. The more you speak God's provision, the more real it becomes to you. Your confidence grows. Fear loses its grip. What once felt uncertain starts to feel established in your heart. This inner stability affects how you respond to challenges. Instead of reacting with panic, you respond with trust. That calm confidence is part of the manifestation process because it keeps you open to God's direction instead of shutting down under stress. Consistent confession also trains your mind. Your thoughts begin to follow the direction of your words. When your speech continually points toward provision, your thinking begins to search for solutions instead of rehearsing problems. Creative ideas, wisdom, and boldness are more likely to surface in an atmosphere of faith than in an atmosphere of worry. Your mouth helps create that atmosphere within you. You may not always feel like speaking faith. Emotions can be strong, especially under financial pressure, but faith is a choice, not a mood. Choosing to say what God said, even when feelings disagree, is an act of spiritual discipline. That discipline keeps you connected to truth. It prevents temporary emotions from dictating long-term direction. Over time, this habit of steady confession builds resilience. You become someone whose words do not swing with every circumstance but remain rooted in promise, maintaining alignment with God's provision, strengthening your expectation, guiding your thoughts, and holding your heart steady in trust as you continue declaring supply, favor, wisdom, and increase until what you have been speaking in faith becomes visible in your life, and the reality you once declared ahead of time stands before you as evidence of the power of persistent agreement with what God has said about your provision, rather than surrendering your confession to the pressure of what you temporarily see.